Well, another, 38 plants across 20 states striking as of Friday as the UAW strike continues. Not everybody obviously on strike, but in a targeted manner. And how and when does this end? We do know that Ford has been excluded, so that protects the Ford Clay Como plant here in the Kansas City area. But we know, of course, on the Kansas side of the state line, the Fairfax GM plant is temporarily shut down because they're impacted by the Wentzville, Missouri strike. They're not getting what they need to do their job, so you got 2,000 people there who are now being impacted. Daniel Howes, he's been all over this story. Detroit News senior editor joins us on KCMO Talk Radio. All right, Daniel, we're sitting here on a Monday. What's the latest on how, when, or if this thing ends anytime soon?
Oh, I don't think anybody's talking about an end to this strike. I mean, I joked yesterday that the one 4 years ago lasted 40 days, and I would think we need to assume that this one will last at least 41 to show who's the bigger boss. But in all seriousness, I don't really have any clue as to when it ends. I do think there are some promising signs with Ford Motor Company. They were not included in this strike of parts depots. I would correct one thing. It's not 38 or whatever plants. These are parts operations, depots, warehouses, things like that. They're not actually, in some cases, producing it, as I understand it.
Okay.
Nevertheless, I mean, I think your point still stands.
Mm-hmm.
That it has been expanded. And likely will expand. I would guess even more this coming Friday.
Really? Okay, so you're expecting more. How does this one compare to the one from 40 years ago? What are the differences and similarities between this one? I don't know. It just feels bigger. It feels like it's getting a lot more attention too. Maybe that's only in my own mind. But what's the difference from now to 4 years ago?
4 years ago, the UAW was in the middle of a multi-year federal investigation into corruption that ultimately led to two of its presidents being indicted and convicted and imprisoned, including the president at the time of the strike 4 years ago, Gary Jones. His legal situation was deteriorating at the time, and a lot of us believed at the time that the strike that he called was, in a sense, being used as a diversion from his personal legal troubles. It didn't work, but nevertheless, it cost General Motors about $3.5 billion. And so I think it was a pretty discreet, even though it was a GM-wide strike, it was pretty discreet in terms of what was going on. This is very different. This is employing a strategy of the likes of which we've never seen before. It's derived from a strike strategy called Chaos that was first developed by the Airline Flight Attendants Union and used very effectively in the 80s and the 90s. And that's essentially what this has been based off of. This is against all three companies at varying levels, as we just discussed. That's never been done before by the UAW. So there's a lot of firsts as far as this is concerned. I think the real question becomes, how do we get off strike? And how does the strike end? As it's famously said by Ron Gettelfinger, former president of the UAW, is anybody can take people out on strike, but it takes a leader to bring them back. And you really need to know what the strategy is and what it is, how you get to yes and how you get back. And this president, Shawn Fain, and his bargainers have laid out a very comprehensive set of demands, several of which are frankly non-negotiable and for the car companies. I mean, they are not going to be reestablishing pensions for all. They are not going to be providing health care for retirees, and they are not going to pay people 40 hours of pay for 32 hours of work. Mm-hmm. I think those are probably safe to assume that they are a bridge too far.
Yeah. Daniel Howes, Detroit News senior editor, is joining us. So, and just to confirm, because a lot of people have asked, hey, this 40-hour pay raise or this 40% pay raise and reducing from 40 to 32-hour work weeks, they want the 40% pay raise getting paid for 40 hours still while reducing the workload to 32 hours. Do I have that right?
you're going to get into the weeds with me a little bit here. One of our reporters would know this a little better than I do, because I think it's a very shifting kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I do know that the UAW has been kind of downplaying this 32-hour work week. I think they're far more focused on the financials about what the rate increase in the pay rate is, or the hourly rate.
Gotcha.
Is most important to them. I think a lot of folks understand that the notion of paying people not to work, which is, by the way, the UAW made famous with its jobs bank, is not something that resonates very well with the public and the buying public.
No, there's no way. Now, that being said, what about the administration's involvement here? I mean, I guess Joe Biden's coming up there to your neck of the woods in Detroit this week. Donald Trump's going to be up there on Wednesday during the second GOP debate. So how do the politicians, how does this administration factor into any kind of end result here?
Well, the Biden administration is in a really, really difficult position here. The president, as everybody knows listening, fancies himself the most pro-labor president in modern American history. Yet this labor union has withheld its endorsement for his reelect because they want to make sure that his support for them is legit and what they believe is appropriate. They don't want the president involved, or any perception that the administration is involved in negotiating this contract. Yet, on the other hand, Shawn Fain on Friday, I believe it was, issued an invitation to the president, among other people, to join them on the picket line. And President Biden pretty quickly made the decision to come. He's scheduled to be here tomorrow. And that's something we've frankly never seen before, that anybody can remember a sitting president walking a UAW picket line. But it is somewhat fraught. I mean, I think on one hand, they want the support of the administration in very specific ways, which the administration is loath to do. So, I mean, I think you can make the argument that it's maybe not a good idea for the president seeking reelect to be here if this strike goes south, things don't turn out, and he is associated with the strike. Additionally, as you point out, former President Trump is going to be here to try and play a role in all of this, and his riff is pretty much EVs are the road to perdition, and they're bad for auto workers, and they shouldn't be supporting them. So it's a very interesting dichotomy, and I think for the president of the United States, it's potentially a lose-lose proposition.
Okay, so you think that for Biden it could be lose-lose because too much will be expected of him then if he shows up? I mean, is he the guy that can basically give the off-ramp to Shawn Fain if he gets involved here in some capacity?
No, without getting too deep into the federal labor law weeds here, the president of the United States does not really have a lot of levers to pull in a UAW strike. He does have those levers to pull if it comes to the railroads or airlines. There are federal laws that apply. The Federal Railway Labor Act, that I think also covers airlines, empowers the president to stop a strike because of the national importance of those networks. It's not the same thing with the auto strike and he doesn't really have those powers. So really what he has is the powers of persuasion. He has appointed an advisor on the auto talks, Gene Sperling, who was very involved during the meltdown, the global financial meltdown, the auto bankruptcies, as part of the Obama administration at the time. He's originally from Ann Arbor. He knows his way around the industry. He is involved as more of a conduit of information. But I think in terms of being at the table or facilitating negotiations, that's, as we understand it, that's not the case at the moment.
All right. Well, Daniel, great insight. Always appreciate you joining us here in Kansas City. And we'll be watching, we'll be following. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
All right. Well done there by Daniel Howes, as he does great work for the Detroit News as their senior editor. Appreciate him joining us on KCMO in Kansas City.